We're going to call to order the City of St. Pete Beach City Commission Budget Workshop. Today is Tuesday, June 25th, 2024. It is 4 p.m. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
City Clerk, if you'll please do a roll call.
Vice Mayor Lorenzen.
Here.
Commissioner Marriott. Here. Commissioner Phillips.
Here.
Mayor Petrola.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. All right. Wayne, who's up first?
Okay. I can get the overhead here on. We're back with what you have in front of you, and what I'll be showing on the screen are some changes to the original presentation that we made back on June the 13th. We think we took pretty good notes of the discussion that night, and we've made some changes that affects the bottom lines, of course, and adds and subtracts some things. So we'll just go through those changes, starting with the general fund. With that first presentation, we were showing a deficit of $246,000 with what was proposed and what had been requested. Since that time, the sheriff has sent us, we lost the screen. Not sure what, there we go. The sheriff sent us their proposed budget that they are taking to the county for next year, which is an increase of 6.6%, which means $370,000 to us, an increase over the current year's sheriff's budget. There's no changes proposed in the number of officers. We still have the discretionary $250,000 that was put in there last year that can be used as we need it to add additional people at different times of the year, which we've done during spring break, weekends, and that sort of thing. So that was a big hit. The next thing, y'all.
Excuse me, Wayne.
I'm sorry.
Do we know how much of that we used in this year of the discretionary sheriff's fund?
I don't have a number, but we used quite a bit of it because we started what we call the spring break patrol, which we added. We had 4 additional officers on weekends, I think, and 2 during the week and holidays. So by the end of our fiscal year, we'll probably use pretty much all of it, because we're continuing the weekend additional ones on the beach service. But I can get a number for you.
I think that gives us a good idea.
Quite a bit of it.
Yeah. So the increase for the sheriff is just, I mean, we're not getting anything extra, so that's just what they're.
It's nothing extra. It's obviously a big part of that is salary changes within the department, other operational cost increases that he's presenting. His budget has not at this point been approved by the county. That's because his budget goes to the county. They did present it in a workshop a couple of weeks ago. But that's, if things go as he's requesting, that would be our increase.
Okay, thank you.
The Hurley Park Playground, y'all indicated you did want to do that. We don't have an agreement with the Montessori school at this point, but what I built into the budget was it'd be a 50-50 deal, and that's why you're seeing on the next line a $70,000 contribution. That could change. That'll be something that the City Commission and the Montessori School will have to decide on that split. The next item is moving from the 50th percentile, which was in the original preliminary plan, to the 60th percentile on the pay plan. And you can see the impact on the general fund there. You also talked about adding additional parking enforcement people. We met with our staff, looked at that to see where we were weak in some of the areas as far as days and times, And the staff recommended one additional full-time and one additional part-time. And of course, the next line, we'd have to have an additional vehicle, but based on when we've added people in the past, probably the additional enforcement would probably pay for itself. So I think that's probably a good move. And y'all stop me at any time if you have questions. This was a big help. The fire station 22 design fees, we had 600,000 programmed in next year's budget. Once we started digging back into this year's budget, we actually have that money in the current year budget. So, but we talked with the architectural firm, and they've now revised the estimate to 750 instead of 600 as a conservative number. So that's why we reduced the budget for next year by 450. Originally I had the 6, but now we only need 150. We had some facility renovations programmed for next year, 280,000. It was 3 or 4 things. The big one was the elevator in the community center. And right offhand, I'm sorry, I don't recall the other ones, but we actually have enough money left in the current year budget to do what we need to do. Some things were cheaper than we thought or not needed, so we can cover that this year. Excuse me. So what we did at that point, we looked at the deficit, which was at that point about $350,000. So we looked at our parking fees to see what we would have to, how we would have to adjust those to make up for that deficit. And right now, our weekday fees are $4 an hour, weekend is $4.75. If we increase those fees by 25 cents, we would raise somewhere around $350,000, which would balance the general fund budget. So that's where we are at this point.
Again, I think I asked this question last time, but I can't recall the answer. Is there a daily maximum? Like,
we do have, on certain days, weekends, I think it is, we do have a maximum daily, a fee for the whole day that people can do, yeah.
So it's cheaper than paying the hourly rate if they're going to be there for 8 or 9 hours.
During those times, right.
Okay.
And the other thing that, I looked at our neighboring cities, and they do have different types of things they do for their residents. And I think that's something that we could look at as we move forward to see if there was something we could do to help our residents with the fees.
On the handout that the staff was nice enough, I don't know if you're going to cover this later, but it looks like we're doing pretty good in FY24 on the parking revenue, but that's only to date, right? So we still have a couple months left.
Yeah, we still have till the end of September.
So that number should increase probably another $30,000, $40,000 maybe. Well, maybe it's summer.
Yeah, well, it'll.
Well, we had a parking increase in September, October last year, and so that's not reflected yet in the remaining months of the year.
All right.
Correct.
And just to back up on one item, so the Hurley Park thing, the original number they threw out is, again, that was their civilian bid, not a government contract, and that was 2 or 3 years ago, was I think 85,000 and change. And they were kind of willing to split that amount, so I hope they don't balk too much at 70K, because that's a bit more than they had originally agreed to. So, but as long as there's some wiggle room, we'll have to.
Yeah, and that'll be
negotiate that.
That'll be something that'll have to come back to y'all for approval at some point.
Okay.
And at that point in time, the budget can be adjusted for that.
Thank you.
So, any questions on that sheet? Anybody have?
I do have a quick question on the this parking revenue handout that we got. And I'm sorry, Mayor, you said that the parking rate was last increased this past September, October?
Yes.
And so the increase in parking revenue from October to October was pretty big, and it was pretty significant from November to November. but then we actually had less revenue in December and less revenue in January and less revenue in February? Or am I looking at that backwards because that's the previous January? I'm just trying to figure out why we raised the parking rates but took in less money this year. Or if the staff has any comment on, who knows? If we had did we have a bunch of parking meters in Paso Grill out of service, or did we have
Well, one of the
particularly
things,
bad weather, or?
we've had a lot of construction going on down there, and we had a lot of spaces that were shut down for quite a while. That may be why you're seeing that.
Yeah, and so I guess we would just have to wait to find out, if we raise the parking rates again, if we're starting to have a reduced revenue because the parking rates are so high that people stop coming, although that doesn't seem to be the case because the parking spots certainly seem full.
Yeah, it hasn't been over the years. It hasn't slowed the parking down when the rates have been increased.
Right, yeah, no, it was just curious to me that the rates went up, but the overall revenue went down and the parking spots all seem full all the time, so,
I don't think it was due to the cost, no.
okay,
Yeah, I think, from what I remember, we had a good bit of rain too,
yeah,
December, January, so that could be a factor.
might have just been weather, yep, okay.
Plus, we had everything from, was it 8th and 9th Avenue South was closed in Paso Grill for several months.
Yeah, we had a lot of them shut down for quite a
Yeah.
while, and still have several shut down.
And then the same thing on the other side as well in Paso Grill Way.
Yes,
Yep. And those are still shut down.
still shut down, and we still have some shut down between First Avenue where they're doing the dredging.
Yeah, that supposedly is over for phase one already, so it might be a month, who knows how long before they remobilize for
Yeah.
phase two.
Yep.
Mhm.
All right, the wastewater fund, at the first workshop, we said we had a $588,000 deficit. The share, if we move to the 60th percentile on the pay plan, there's a slight increase in that. So it shows you a $594,000 deficit. As far as our reserves are concerned, in wastewater, we currently have about $975,000 in reserves. But, if nothing was done, that would reduce your reserves in the wastewater fund down to about $380,000. But we're showing you there, the current rate's $44.65, which is the base rate. First 3,000, and it's a $14.73 for each 1,000 gallons in excess of the base. So the next numbers there show you what would have to be done to the rates to generate basically $595,000, which would balance the wastewater fund budget. It's about a 6.6% change in the fees if you wanted to do that. Again, like I said, without doing a rate increase, your reserves in that fund would reduce from about $975,000 down to about $380,000 in that fund. Now this, if you want to increase the rates, this is one of those that can be done. It's in the Appendix A in our code. It's done by ordinance, 2 readings of the ordinance. It's normally done in September as a part of the budget approval. So, you don't have to make that decision tonight or today. Actually, you can't make that decision. This is just a workshop. But I did want to show you that, and if you do think that that would be the thing to do, we can program that into any other adjustments we need to make in the budget that you would have once you get into the budget public hearings.
So the reserves, I think you said it was 600 and something K. What's the main purpose of that reserve? Is it for catastrophic failure?
Well, a couple of things, yeah. You always have operation and maintenance issues that come up during the year that you did not expect. You may have a big pump that goes out, you know, in the wastewater fund, everything you have is expensive, you know, so, you know, we've had pumps go out, so you can have a $200,000 or $300,000 expenditure pretty quickly. So, you know, I think the city needs to have adequate reserves in your sewer system. You know, if you had a failure in a line somewhere, you know, you're talking about some big bucks. And of course, then the catastrophic events that may come along, but of course, that's a whole different issue. So, but it's mainly the unknown. This is the reason you want your reserves to be adequate, the unknowns that you may have with equipment or line failures, especially in the sewer fund.
So basically, we'd be talking about, for the first 3,000 gallons, it'd be a $3 raise, and then a buck for every 1,000 gallons over that.
Yes, sir.
Or,
That's what you would need to do in order to cover that $594,000 deficit that's shown right now.
and this is a bi-monthly bill, if I'm not mistaken, or every 2 months, right?
This bill, yeah, I think you receive that bill every 2 months as a part of your water bill.
$7, so basically $10 for a large group.
So, I mean, it would be good to hear from y'all on whether you want to live with that reserve or try to cover it or cover part of it. But like I said, the final decision on that would not be made until you basically have 2 public hearings in September.
I did a little bit of research on this. So the data, according to the EPA, is that the average person uses 82 gallons per day. So over a month span, roughly 2,500. So a family of 4 is using roughly 10,000 gallons a month. So just some information.
Yeah, so basically $10 more every 2 months, plus whatever we're going to talk about with the reclaimed water, which is another 6 as proposed. So basically, we're talking about $16 more every 2 months.
Yeah, I would certainly put this as a priority over the reclaim. You know, this is the one I think that would be more important.
This is per month, correct?
That is based on, yes, that's a monthly use, yeah.
So this is the monthly charge, which gets invoiced every 2 months, so it would
You're
be,
billed every 2 months, yeah.
this is per month.
Yeah.
Yes, so it still would be about $10 per month for 10,000 gallons,
Yeah.
but you get invoiced every 2 months, so you'll see,
Yeah, it'd be like $20 for
Commissioner Phillips, I'm not sure where you got that information, but that sounds very high compared to the numbers I've seen before.
Yeah, it's from EPA.gov.
Okay, that, yeah, I think if we looked at our specific situation, yeah, I think there's a lot of people that actually fall in that 3,000 gallons a month. I know my wife and I fall within that 3,000 every month, you know.
So is that base rate, is that set by the city or the county?
No, this is strictly a city.
As far as the base rate being 3,000 gallons?
Yes, that's a city set rate.
I guess I always hesitate to raise taxes because they just never go down, they never level off, they continuously go up, but I guess I'm open to what the rest of the commissioners think on this one.
Well, this, of course, is not a tax. This is a charge for a service that's provided.
You know how that goes. Tax by any other name. It's an increase for sure.
And of course, the biggest cost to the city is what we have to pay the city of St. Petersburg to treat the sewage that we send over there.
Just to give you my 2 cents on it, Wayne alluded to the reserves and why you have those for any kind of failure in any of the conveyance systems. And if, I mean, us being so close to the water, that could, what we try to avoid legally is any discharge into the waterways, because with any discharge, we're required to report that to the state. And so there are some legal things that I get concerned about when we put ourselves in a position where we can't handle any potential problems like that. It's a little different being on a barrier island.
I mean, I would be kind of inclined, I think, to Commissioner Filtz's point, I hate to overly punish larger households, which I think is, which I think is a little bit of a concern. I know, Wayne, you said, you and your wife are easily in that 3,000 gallons a month, and I know, like for my husband and I, we are as well. But, I would perhaps be in favor of looking at maybe modifying that spot at which we switch from the base rate to the excess rate. And I'm not sure, I'm not sure how that changes the revenue that we generate. Because I'm not sure what assumption we're making on how many gallons of water is used, or if we're looking at, when we got I guess that generates an extra $595,000. That's just based on what we got in revenue last year, and then adding that % increase on it, or?
About, and I had those numbers. We actually did a study last year of y'all did, how it's broken down between the base rate and the excess rate, and but it was a different increase. I don't recall those right offhand, but yeah, you would have to do some other math to figure out, what a difference would be if you wanted to put more of an increase on the base rate and less on the excess. Would have to.
Well, or I was even thinking, like, if the base rate increase stayed the same, but you increase the base rate to the first 4,000 gallons, or 5,000 gallons of water usage, but then the excess rate went up a little bit more, how that would balance out, so that you're, if you have a household with 4 or 5 people in it, they're not paying as much extra, I'm not sure, I don't have those numbers in front of me, so I'm not sure how that math would work, but.
Yeah, there's a lot of different scenarios there.
Yeah.
And the 3,000 gallon is pretty universal. A lot of people use that.
That pretty standard amongst municipalities.
Yeah, I've seen that in many jurisdictions.
Okay.
There are other ones, but yeah, if y'all want us to look at some other mix, we could certainly look at that.
Yeah, I might be open to that, because it just seems like we're putting a larger burden on a group because they have a family.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
But they're using more water.
Well, yeah.
And more sewer, so,
Yeah.
and that's an enterprise fund, you pay for what you use.
Yeah, the inverse of that is also true. If you increase the base rate from 3,000 to 4,000, and the average household of 2 people uses 3,000 or less, all of a sudden they're paying for something they're not even using.
Correct.
Versus, at least this way, it's a fair distribution. You use what you pay for. You use more water, you pay for more water. You use more sewer, you use more electricity, you pay for more electricity.
Absolutely.
And really, in that 3,000 gallons, if you have a pool, you're going to pay more as well.
Yeah.
Right? So now, I think raising that threshold, it really just ends up punishing potentially a group of individuals that, you might have a 1-bedroom condo that's inhabited by 1 person, and they're not even using 3,000, but they're still paying for 3,000.
Exactly.
And if we raise that any higher, now you're putting an undue burden on people that are not even using the system, paying for something that they're not using. I'm not sure what that accomplishes.
Is that a fact, that somebody uses 1,000 gallons of water a month pays for 3,000?
They still pay the $44.65.
Okay, that's a good point. I think at this point, I'm kind of willing to let this one go to ordinance or readings and let the public weigh in on this one.
Mm-hmm.
I think while I 100% agree with you, I'm not a big fan of increases. On the other hand, we can't afford the deficit in the wastewater fund. I think what we talked about last time is where you felt comfortable, Wayne, was around $1 million minimum. And if we do this increase, that maintains the balance kind of where it is right now. If we don't, that's going to deplete our fund down to about $350.
Yeah, it brings it
And
down to
that's
380.
one catastrophic incident.
Yeah.
But just, you know, there's a lot of different standards that cities look at. Is, you know, how much reserve should you have? And, you know, a lot of cities look at 3 months of your expenditures as pretty much a minimum. If we're looking at 3 months reserves in our wastewater fund, we're talking about you should have over $2 million in reserves. So, you know, the reserves in our wastewater fund are extremely low, so I would certainly encourage you to do some sort of an adjustment to try to get those reserves. If y'all remember, it hadn't been that long to when we've had to, you know, set up temporary pumps over on, I think it's Gulf Boulevard, where we were having overflows. We were having to pump 24 hours a day. That's a lot of money, a lot of cost. So, you know.
Well, and also, I think in light of the street flooding we're going to continue to have until we can get those tidal flow valves fixed, and you just start thinking about all the things that could happen. Now you get a wastewater spill or something in the middle of that. Oof. So, all right.
Yeah.
But it will come up. Like I said, I guess our question now is, do you want, as far as the budget document that will be moving forward, do you want us to put this type of an adjustment in there, or do you want to just still show that we would be down to 380 reserves, and that would be something to be adjusted later? You know, just which way you want us to show it in the proposed budget as we're moving forward. I mean, I would suggest we indicate an increase, but like I said, you'll still have 2 public hearings on it before it's done.
I'm good with as published, let the public weigh in.
Yeah.
Not in love with it, but we got to move.
Okay.
Yep.
Likewise.
Reclaimed. We started out with a basically $275,000 deficit. See, it's just a minor hit as far as the pay plan. So we looked at what it would do for a rate increase. Actually, we didn't. Actually, I missed a modification on this. The 281,000 is actually the deficit without the rate increase. So that line should not even be in there at this point, where it shows rate increase 25 to 31, 276. Sorry for that. That was a mistake on our slide. As we have it right now, we're showing a $281,000 deficit. Below that, you can see a $6 increase in that monthly fee would provide about $276,000. Like I said a minute ago, if you're going to make any adjustment, I think it ought to be back in the wastewater rather than reclaimed. The reclaimed water we have without any adjustment, we've still got almost $1 million in reserves in that fund. So I don't feel uncomfortable with having that in the current budget or in the proposed budget. Actually be 971,000 still in reserves without any adjustment to that rate. So that's why we're not showing a rate increase in the total numbers at this point. But if y'all wanted to balance that, that's what it would take. And again, this would still be a public hearing if you wanted to do that, but we have not included that.
Yeah, I mean, wastewater is a necessity, reclaimed waters, I hate to say it's a nicety, but it kind of is in some ways. So I'm willing to stick with that minor deficit since we're already asking $10 more a month for larger families.
And we don't have as big of a risk here as we do in the wastewater.
It stops for a while, it stops. And then, because otherwise there's another 6 added to that $10 raise for the other one. So,
Yep.
Okay, everybody okay there? Okay. Stormwater, we had some good news on this one. We started out, this was the worst one to start with. We had $1 million deficit shown in next year's budget. Fortunately, we have good reserves. After the last workshop, we received news that we did get a legislative appropriation of $625,000 to help in the stormwater fund. And we also, 2 years ago, the city started a resiliency fund and did not have anything shown in expenditures in that fund for this year, or for next year. But one thing we did have in the stormwater fund was a watershed master plan for resiliency. So what we're proposing to do is actually move that expenditure from the stormwater fund to that resiliency fund. And by doing that, along with the legislative appropriation, it gets our deficit down to $200,000 in the stormwater. And that particular fund, that we still, with that deficit, we would still have 1.3 million in reserves. So I think we're, the other thing on the stormwater, let me mention that because we had talked about this is not a fee. This is an assessment that the city does every year that's actually on the tax bills. And in order to do that assessment, we have to do an assessment roll every year. We have a consultant that's been doing that every year. We have to go, and there's a lot of moving parts to that fee. There's a one tier that's if you have your own on-site water treatment, another tier if you do not. There's also, and this goes back to the question that Commissioner Marriott, you asked me, you thought there were two different ones, and I went back and looked how this was structured originally, and there's some of the fee is based on fixed costs, some of the fee is based on variable costs. So there's a lot of moving parts. So if you wanted to look at an adjustment to that stormwater assessment, you really need to do another study on it, have somebody look at the assessment rolls, look at how moving each of those components would impact it, and also look at how it would impact the different users as far as your commercial users, your residential users. So the city did a study like that originally when it was adopted back 15, 14 years ago. Did a second one when I was here before, and I think the city did one about 4 or 5 years ago, 4 years ago, I think, when an adjustment was made. So I think that's something y'all need to definitely look at in the coming year before we get to this point next year, is have a study done to see how that should be adjusted, because obviously we need additional money in that fund with all the stormwater projects that we're trying to do. So, but for this year, at this point, I think we still have 1.3 in reserve, so I would not recommend doing anything right now.
Mm-hmm. We got a question on that. Roughly, how much would a study for that cost?
I haven't looked at the study. I don't have a number, but we would have to adjust our stormwater budget by that number, but we're still in good shape. But we would do that before we publish the next document. We'd see what that study cost us before, and actually talk to the company that did it and see how the costs have changed so we'd have a good budget number.
Okay, thank you.
The next slide, we added the code enforcement. This was something that actually the dollars were in the budget we presented before. We had just forgot to list it. The code enforcement administrative assistant we have a part-time position now, and we're talking about moving that to a full-time position and changing some of the duties there, but it doesn't change the bottom line because we already had the dollars in, we just failed to list it. The other addition that we made from before are those parking enforcement that we talked about back when we were talking about the general fund. Those were the ones that were discussed before. I did discuss with our staff about additional code enforcement. I don't have a recommendation on that at this, but that might be something that you want to look at a little bit further, but I think we're in pretty good shape on that.
Do you have any idea how many code enforcement, I mean, it feels to me like for a town this size, we already have a relatively large code enforcement department. Is there any kind of, standard for number of code enforcement officers per capita population if you take out, if you're not counting parking enforcement, if you're just looking at code enforcement? I feel like I've lived in cities that are 5 times bigger than this with 1 or 2 code enforcement officers.
It really depends on how aggressive you want to be. I know at one time the city was just reactionary. We only looked at when we got a complaint. Our code enforcement would take, and at some point over the past few years, the department started going out and looking for code violations, and you can see that in the number of violations that have been, that have been issued over the years, and the value, the income that comes along with that. I don't know that there's any standard. I think it boils down to how aggressive you want to be in enforcing your codes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something I've heard from a number of residents about, about feeling like code enforcement has gotten overly aggressive around here. I've heard of people saying, my buddy who was a plumber was over for a barbecue, and then the code guys were telling me I was working without a permit, and because I had a plumbing truck parked in my driveway, and I feel like when it gets to there, it seems a little overly aggressive. But my question was going to be on kind of all of these proposed new positions. If we're putting these in the budget, there's still lots of room when our new city manager comes in, as she wants to rearrange people.
Absolutely.
For these to be filled or not, right? Or
Absolutely.
Moved around and changed. And so we're not committing to absolutely, just because we're budgeting for these positions, that we're going to aggressively go out and hire them and fill them, depending on, the direction she decides to take some departments.
Well, what you're doing is putting the money in the budget to hire these positions. And of course, it'll be up to the new city manager has to sign off on any new positions that are hired. And so I'm assuming that she would be looking at that, as she moves forward to see if she agrees with that or not, As far as I'm concerned, when I discussed all of these with all of our department directors, I thought they were necessary. I thought they were needed, and that's why I included them. There were others that I did not, after we discussed, did not see they were necessary. So the ones you see there are ones that I felt our departments made a good call on the need.
Okay.
This is just that summary of overall reserves and all the various funds we have. Now, I know there's some funds listed here that we did not go over specifically. We just went over our enterprise funds and our general fund. These other ones, there's not a whole lot that, they're not fee-based or anything like that. It's a lot of it is transfers from funds like our capital fund, and that's a big number because I think I explained it at the last meeting, we transfer money into that fund every year, so when a piece of equipment or a vehicle comes up for replacement, that money's there. So, you may have a $1 million piece of equipment or a fire apparatus or something coming up. So that's why you see a big number there, because that's a 5-year capital plan that we have moving down the road. Some of those other ones are the ARPA fund. We're spending all of that money. That was the the storm assistance that we received. So that's why you don't see anything for 25, because we're showing all of that money has been actually budgeted this year. Fleet fund, that's just another transfer that we make for cars and trucks. The building fund itself, I think we need to the city should look at the fees that are charged in the building fund as well as in our planning department. I think the building fund may be okay. There's state statute that limits how that money can be spent. You cannot charge a fee, cannot charge fees higher than what the service we're providing. But it needs to be looked at every now and then. I'm not sure the last time that the city really did an analysis on that. And so in the future, and I've talked with our staff about it, that, as we go forward, that's some of the other fees that can be looked at in the building fund, is in our planning department, review, fire review, those fees. We've talked to staff about that. Those need to be reviewed. So there may be some other opportunities moving forward to help out our budgets, but that gives you just a snapshot of where we are on all those funds. And that's pretty much everything I have. The one thing that affected each of the budgets that we discussed is the pay plan. And that'll be on tonight's regular meeting agenda for hopefully approval. The recommendation, like I said, we've had is the 60th percentile. I think, with the situation the city's in, a barrier island, in order to be really in the market to try to attract people and retain people, we need to be above the middle. So I think that's money well spent to get to the 60th percentile. And then, like I said, we're looking at a minimum of a 2%, a maximum of $10,000 on any of them. So I think it's a good plan. I'm pretty happy with the consultant's recommendations on that. So but that'll be coming up later on tonight. But that's really all I have for you on the budget. There will be, like I said, public hearings. The next official action that the commission has to take, other than tonight on the pay plan, will be at the second meeting in July, when you'll need to direct the staff on what you want the tentative millage rate to be advertised as. We have to send Mr. Twitty's office, the tax collector's office, our proposed millage or tentative millage 1st of August. You can always go down on that, but that's the notice he'll put out on what's called a trim bill, and it'll be mailed out to every property owner. But then in September will be when y'all will look at that and actually adopt it. You can always go down on it at that point, but you can't increase it without going through jump through a lot of hoops. But so, we built this budget based on keeping the exact same millage rate that we have now, which is 3.07. At the same public hearings in September, when you'll adopt the final millage rate, you'll also have 2 public hearings looking at the any rate increases, like the wastewater, and you'll also have 2 public hearings on adopting the budget. So, and between now and then, you've got an opportunity to, if other things come up, you could call another workshop to discuss other things too. But I feel like we're in pretty good shape with what we've talked about at this point.
All right, thank you, Wayne. Any further questions or comments for Wayne?
I'm in shock. Are we allowed to conclude this early?
I suppose we are. All right, unless there's anything else, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.